Hello everybody and welcome back to the Blues Knot channel. Today I am back with the first, or not the first, but the second power rankings of this season. Well, technically it should have been the first one because the last one was kind of like a little kind of preseason kind of power rankings. And finally this will be the first power rankings that we actually have teams that have at least played one game. Well, actually, for 20 teams, they definitely have played at least one game, but 3 other teams, that is like Chicago, New York, Redbulls, and also Colorado, they'll probably have to wait another week. But we at least got some sample sizes of how each team goes on, and we don't really need to rely on what they did in the offseason to kind of determine what happened in the power rankings. And, you know, one thing I'll say about the power rankings, and I kind of said this in my last power ranking, my first power rankings ever on this channel, is that these teams that I put, the spots that I put them on, doesn't tell you how good or how bad the team is. It's just that how are they in terms of their current form. So if a team wins a lot of games and have a winning streak going on, I'm definitely going to put them high in the power rankings. But if a team that is having a long losing streak and they might be a very good team like TFC or NYCFC, I'm still going to move them down in the power rankings. So, you know, this power rankings is based on current form, not actually how good a team is. So, without further ado, let's actually begin this power rankings, and there's definitely going to be some surprises in this power rankings. But the first one, let's start with the bottom, and this shouldn't be a surprise because I think this team is going to be here for a while, and that of course is the New England Revolution, who moved down 2 spots from my first power rankings. I mean, the Revs, it's pretty clear that this is gonna be a long season for them, and that, you know, after that loss against the Union, and a team that is also going to potentially struggle this year, and how they had 2 men sent off in that game. Both of them were center backs. New England is just literally, it feels like doom and gloom right now. And, you know, talk about the sending off and how they had their 2 center backs sent off. Now their defense is just gets even weaker. The good news is, maybe the only silver line I would say about New England is that the next opponent they'll face will be Colorado, which is a team that doesn't really have a very good attacking threat. So maybe they can get away with that with putting pretty much their backup center back, which, you know, I don't even know how their backup center back looks. I mean, their starter center backs are already shit. So I'm guessing their backup center backs is going to be even shittier. I think. I don't know. But New England is just, I don't know what to say. This team looked like a dumpster fire right now. And unless they start a crazy winning streak, they're going to be stuck in this bottom row for a while. But yeah, either way, next team, and moving up 1 spot from last week. And this team lost this week, but I'm putting them 1 spot up. Because of the New England situation, is Minnesota. And like I said, they lost 3-2 to the Quakes. And have they not scored those 2 goals, have Kevin Molino did not score those 2 goals in the between the 80th to the 85th minute, and really kind of make the game super interesting, I think Minnesota would have been stuck in the basement. But because they score those 2 goals, and because they try to make the game interesting, I'm going to move them up just because of that. Because if you compare this loss to the Revs loss, I think Minnesota loss is not as bad as it is. I mean, yes, they weren't in the game for the first 80 minutes. They at least made it interesting, okay? So that's why I'm going to move them up 1 spot. And also moving 1 spot, and this is one of the 3 teams that did not play this week, and that, of course, is Colorado. I can't really move Colorado down a spot because, you know, they didn't play this week, and it would be just really unfair to move them down a spot. And also, it's going to create a problem, too, because if I move Colorado to last, that means that Minnesota would potentially be in 21st, and I don't want to move them 2 spot after a loss. And New England's going to be in 22nd. So, it also has something to do with the team below them and how there's some kind of problems with putting Colorado into the last spot because other teams might have performed pretty well or they did not do well at all. So that's why I decided to put them in 21st. They might go down if they lose to the Refs, but for now I'm just gonna move them up to 21st, and I'm sure the Rapids fan will probably be a little bit happy about that. Also, I do apologize for the fact that the camera just gone really blurry for some reason. I don't know why. It was good early, but oh well. But either way, moving up to 20th, and this team stays at the same spot as last week, and that is Montreal. Montreal lost to the Whitecaps. They lost 2-1 to them. And again, this also goes back to where I don't really know where to I can't really put them down around this area, because if I move Montreal down 1 spot, that means Colorado have to go up 1 spot, and there's no way I'm putting the Rapids up 2 spots after they didn't even play this week. And I thought Montreal did pretty decently in that loss against the Whitecaps. It wasn't an embarrassing kind of loss, so I decided to just put them in 20th for now, even though they did lose that game to the Whitecaps. Next up, and moving down 2 spots from last week's power rankings, it's gonna be FC Dallas. FC Dallas did get a draw against RSL. But I think that if you look at that game and how they had multiple chances in that game and how they literally, and hell, if they lost that game against RSL, I would have probably moved FC Dallas to 20th and moved Montreal up 1 spot, because FC Dallas in that game, they definitely were the better team between them and RSL, but they just could not put those chances away. And it's a frustrating draw for FC Dallas because, that's 2-point drop at home. And it was a chance for them to get all 3 points and start their redemption year off to a good start. But instead, it's kind of started with a little bit of a rocky start. And that's why I decided to move them 2 spots down than where they are. But next up, another team that also went down. But only went down by 1 spot, and that is DC United. And for DC, they drew against Orlando, which should be a very good point until you realize how they drew against Orlando City. I mean, they were up 10. Well, they were not up by 10 men, but they were up a man in that game against Orlando City, and they looked really threatening going on the attack. But for whatever reason, in the second half, they decided to just bunker down and allow Orlando City to come at them, and they concede a very late goal in the 93rd minute. And it feels more like now it's a 2-point drop for them than a 1-point gain from going on the road against Orlando City. So that's why I decided to move them down a spot for that. Next up, and this team moved up 2 spots from last week power rankings, and that is the Union. The Union, of course, took care of business against the Revs. They kind of got help with the fact that the Revs went down to 10 men literally about half hour into the match, and pretty much went down to 9 men by the end of the game. And it's a good win for the Union. They definitely took care of business at home, and that exactly is what they needed if they want to hope that they can contend for the playoffs. But for me, they were playing against New England, which is one of the worst team in the league. So it's just it's not a very kind of convincing kind of win that say that they're gonna content for the playoffs, but at least they took care of business, which is why I decided to move them up. And also, one of the common theme you already seen is I usually move team up when they win, and I usually move them down if they lose. And sometimes I move them up, and sometimes when I move them down if they draw a game. So yeah. Meanwhile, moving up 2 spots also from last week is LAFC. Now, have no other teams around them actually won their game. And the other thing that I also say about the power rankings from this week is that a lot of teams won their game in the middle of the pack, and a lot of teams lost their game or drew their game in the top 10. In fact, I think there was only like 2 teams from my last week power rankings that actually won in the top 10, and there was a lot of teams that won in the middle of the pack. So that is exactly why I didn't move LAFC higher than it should be. And also the win against Seattle, you know, it was a great win, certainly a historic win for them, but at the same time, if you look at the overall kind of game, they kind of got lucky with the win. I mean, Seattle was just all over them in that game. You know, ever since they went up 1-0, they basically just decided to bunker down, and you know, Seattle was putting so much pressure on them that I don't know how they hold on for 70 minutes. And if this is the way that they're going to be playing for the rest of the season, then it's not going to be good. You know, they are not going to get away with a result like that. And also, I forgot to mention that Seattle was playing a lot of second-string players in that game. They were resting a lot of guys for that midweek game against Chivas, and that's why LAFC kind of sort of got the win, because they were playing a weaker Seattle team. But still, take nothing away from that win from LAFC. It was a very impressive win, and they got a win in a place that not a lot of teams usually get a win. You know, CenturyLink is a very tough place to get a win there. But either way, moving up 1 spot in 15th place is Vancouver. The Whitecaps, of course, took care of business against Montreal, and just like Philly, it's not really a win that you can say that, well, they're back in contention for the playoffs, but it's more like they took care of business. It's a win that they should obviously get because they're playing at home against a weaker team, and yeah, that's why I decided to move them up 1 spot for that. Meanwhile, in 14th, and these next 2 teams, by the way, is going to be teams that did not play this week, and I'll start with Chicago, who moved down from 1 spot, and actually I'm going to even do number 13. The other team that did not play this week and moving down 2 spots from last week power rankings is the Redbulls. And you know, these 2 teams, unfortunately I had to move them down because a lot of teams around them won. And this also goes back to what I say, how a lot of teams in the middle of the pack won, and I just had to move them down and move up teams that actually won in the middle of the pack. Because if I put them at the same spot, then it's going to be really hard for me to move up teams that won up the power rankings. And I don't want to just make teams that won a game to not move up the power rankings. It's very rare that actually happened, where a team won a game and I do not move them up in the power rankings, because that just sounds cruel. They won a game. They should deserve to move up in the power rankings. So that's why I decided to move these teams down a little bit. But if they win their next game, then they'll move back up to potentially where they were, or maybe a little bit higher than where they were last week. Either way, this team moves up 2 spots from last week, and it's going to be the LA Galaxy. Of course, they won 2-1 against the Timbers, a pretty good win for them. Although you could have argued LA probably should have won this game, or should have just put away this game earlier than it should be, because they were all over Portland in that first half. I mean, they could have easily scored 3, 4, or maybe 5 goals in that first half, and then in the second half they allow a very silly goal and let Portland back into the game, and kind of made it a very interesting right near the end. And because of that, that's why I decided to move them. I'm gonna move them up, but not like really dramatically, because at the end of the day, in that game, they did look like the better team, but they didn't really sort of like dominate the game. They didn't really put away the chances to just, nail themselves to get a W in that games, and kind of had to make it interesting late. So that's why I decided to move them just 2 spots. And in 11th place, and this team is also kind of similar to what I just said. It's going to be my Quakes team. I moved them 1 spot, and have they won 3-0 in this game and have not giving up those 2 late goals to Minnesota, I would have probably moved them up into the top 10. Like I said, the Quakes, they did their business in this game. They got a win that, they should definitely get against Minnesota. And, I'm not going to say that I'm a little bit concerned after when we conceded those 2 late goals to Minnesota and almost kind of bought a 3-0 lead with just 10 minutes to go. But, I'm just hoping that that's just a sign of the team just kind of got exhausted. And by the way, the team looked really exhausted at the end of the game. If you actually like watch my vlog and you actually watch like right when the final whistle blew, you can see a couple players literally just collapse on the floor and just looked like they were out of breath. I think Nick Lima, immediately when that final whistle blew, he literally just collapsed on the floor, and so was Danny Houston, although Danny Houston kind of took a seat and started to try to catch his breath. This just tells you how the team looked really exhausted after that game. And of course, that is a kind of a case with most teams, since this is the first week of the season. Even though these teams have like a month of preseason, they still have not really got into the game where really things get, where players from each team will always give their 100% effort, and the intensity is definitely higher in a regular season game than it is in a preseason. And it kind of showed with the Quakes and how they just look absolutely gassed, and just those 2 goals that they conceded was just basically because they look really tired. So yeah, they of course moved up 1 spot. And in 10th place, this is my biggest loser and the team that probably dropped the most, and that of course is Atlanta. Atlanta lost 4-0 to Houston, and this shouldn't be a surprise, the fact that I put them so low like this. And the overall performance from that game against Houston from Atlanta was just embarrassing. I mean, it was just absolutely embarrassing. The defense was just all over the place for Atlanta. The midfield was also all over the place, and also the fact that after that performance in the midfield, it's pretty clear that they miss Carlos Carmola, his presence in the midfield, doing the dirty work in the middle of the park. So yeah, I'm gonna say that they dropped the furthest in this because they had a shocking performance against Houston. Even though the game is on the road, this game could have ended 5 or 6-0 in favor of Houston. That is how bad the defense was. Houston did miss a couple of really good chances in the first half and also in the second half, but overall Atlanta was just absolutely dreadful in this game. And yeah, like I said, they of course finish in 10th place. They moved down 7 spot from the power rankings. Either way, now let's get into the top 10. Well, technically, we're already in the top 10. And staying at the same spot as last week, it's going to be RSL. RSL obviously got a 1-1 draw against FC Dallas. And, they'll definitely be a little bit disappointed the fact that they give away an own goal right near the end, but I still think that that's a very good result for RSL, considering the fact that they didn't really look that good in that game against FC Dallas, and to get a point from just a kind of an off night performance for RSL is definitely a good point for them. So that's why I decided to just put them at the same spot, not really move them down or move them up from the power rankings. And yeah, next up, and moving down 3 spots from last week, is going to be Portland. The Timber, of course, lost to the Galaxy 2-1, and it's pretty clear that the defense for the Timbers are a huge issue. I mean, in that game against the Galaxy, the defense was just all over the place, and we kind of knew it in the beginning of the season how the defense was going to be the Achilles heel for Portland. I mean, even their best defender, Ridgewell, had a very off night, and then the rest was kind of shambolic. And really, for Portland, they need to fix this defense, because if they don't fix this defense, then there is a big kind of possibility that this team could actually miss the playoffs. And also for Portland, it doesn't get easier for them in the next couple of games. I think they play, I forgot who they play next, but it's definitely not going to be easy. I know they have a couple of games in the Eastern Conference. They have to make that long trip to the East Coast. So yeah, I mean, things are not looking good for Portland, and Portland might be off to a very slow start if they do not get this defense figured out. So yeah, that's why I moved them down from 3 spot. And that by the way, that game, Portland was very fortunate to actually stay in that game, because they gave up so many chances in that game that the Galaxy should have at least parried maybe 3 or 4 of them. So they were very lucky to escape with just a 2-1 loss. Either way, and this is the biggest mover of the week, and this is actually from the same game that make the losing team to become the biggest loser and the biggest kind of teams that move down the most in this power rankings. Is Houston. Obviously a very impressive win for Houston, and by the way, they moved up 7 spot from last week, and this is what Houston did last year at home. And if Houston can do the same thing that they did to Atlanta, and they can repeat what they did at home last season, there is no doubt this team is going to make the playoffs. I mean, there is just absolutely no doubt. I mean, maybe if they can fix their away form and they can do what they did at home, then I think this team could be a top 3 team too. So yeah, obviously Houston moved up 7 spot from last week, a big win against Atlanta. And another team that also got a big win this week on the row is Columbus, who moved up 4 spot from last week, and they beat Toronto at BMO Field, a place that Toronto have not lost since 2016. And yeah, I mean, that was a very impressive win for Columbus, and the way they were able to shut down that TFC attack was also very good. And Columbus might be a team, and I really think these 2 teams look like these 2 teams are once again going to be teams that a lot of people might be kind of underrating them in the preseason, and that of course kind of include myself, because I kind of put Columbus and Houston out of the playoffs. And if these 2 teams can continue to do what exactly they did this week, then there's no doubt that they can definitely make it to the playoffs this season. So yeah, Columbus with a very impressive win against Toronto. That moved them up 4 spot. And moving down a spot from the top 5 is going to be Seattle, who moved down 1 spot from last week. And Seattle obviously lost to LAFC. It was a 1-0 loss, and it certainly is a bad loss for them, because LAFC is a team that is sort of not very good, okay? And I was thinking that Seattle, with that good home record and the fact that they just come up with that 4-0 beatdown in the CCL round of 16, I thought that was going to carry the momentum to beat LAFC, but that of course is not the case. And to be fair, Seattle kind of started a lot of their second string players, and they still of course dominated against LAFC, and they kind of got unlucky with the fact that they didn't put one into the back of the net. I mean, you know, every team has those days where just nothing goes right for you, and that you just cannot put it into the back of the net for whatever reason, even though you had like 22 shots and 7 shot on target, and you basically completely outshot the opponent. And Seattle just had one of those days, and I shouldn't worry about Seattle, the fact that this could potentially be a downfall for them. I think it's just the fact that they have a CCL game in the midweek, and Brian Schritzer definitely need to rest his guys for that game, and he decided to rest his guys. He decided to take a little gamble against LAFC, and the gamble did not pay off, unfortunately. So yeah, either way, now moving on to 4th place, and this team stays in the same position as last week, and that is Orlando. And Orlando was very unlucky in this game. And certainly a lot of Orlando City fans must hate the referee after that game. I mean, they felt like they got completely robbed in that game, because first they had a red card that I really think wasn't a red card at all, and then, you know, there was also a decision with the handball, which, by the way, that handball, I'm gonna actually now go back to that for a minute, and I actually watched it again today, and there was one very fascinating thing that I also found out that I didn't realize when I made the review. So remember how I said that when Maddox was coming into the box and he tried to make a cross, and then it accidentally struck the hand of Will Johnson, and Johnson had his hand near his hips, that, you know, was kind of like, it was kind of unfortunate that of course happened, and I really think that wasn't a handball, because Johnson kind of put his hand in a natural spot. I don't really think with your hand in your hips while you're trying to defend a cross is just an unnatural position. But the other interesting thing I found is that when that ball hit Johnson's hand, it ricocheted to another Orlando City player, and I actually don't know who exactly this was, but it ricocheted off of another Orlando City player, and that Orlando City player also handballed it off of that ricochet. And I think I watched the instant replay video on MLS, and they talked about how that was the reason why a lot of Orlando City fans are not happy that it was given a red card, because, you know, the ball was just ricocheted off of one of the defender's hand and onto another player. And, you know, from what I see with that is that, you know, if you're a defender that just handballed it off of a ricochet and off of a deflection, it's really unfortunate, and usually referee never calls that, because what can you do about it? I mean, unless if you actually literally intentionally decide to handball it off of a deflection, which clearly that Orlando City player did not do, then that obviously is going to be a handball. But like I said, that wasn't the case. It was the ball, when it was ricocheted off of Will Johnson's hand and hit another Orlando City player, that Orlando City player knew nothing about it. So I think that was a very harsh kind of red card, or not red card, but a harsh kind of penalty, which fortunately for Orlando City, it didn't really cost them. But still, you know, they of course kind of got lucky, the fact that they of course rescued them with a draw late in the game and scoring a late goal for them. They could have easily just dropped all 3 points, and if they would have dropped all 3 points, I would have moved them down in the power rankings. So for now, I'm just going to put them in 4th place. Either way, moving up to now into the top 3, and moving down 2 spots from last week is going to be TFC. Toronto, of course, lost to the Crew at home, and, you know, obviously it's a pretty bad loss for them, and I think that's like their first home loss since 2016, and they did not do very good in that game. The midfield was a big problem for them, and the defense didn't look that good either. And yeah, I mean, I had to, of course, move them down from their top spot. I know there's a lot of team in the top 10 that did not win this week, and hence, I know some people will ask, well, how come Atlanta moved all the way down to 10th place and they were like in the top 3, and why do you move TFC down all the way, like, let's say right around here, because they lost to the Columbus Crew? Well, the reason why that is the case is, first of all, the Atlanta loss was much bigger margin, and I really think the Atlanta one, they literally just completely embarrassed themselves with that performance. TFC had a couple of chances to equalize in this game, and unfortunately they didn't take advantage of those chances. And yeah, that is exactly why I put them in 3rd place. And they were also playing a pretty good opponent too. Columbus is a very good opponent, and was that opponent that almost knocked them out of the MLS Cup last season. So yeah, that's why I put them in 3rd place. And in 2nd place, and I think this is, besides Minnesota, this is the only other team that lost their game, and I moved them up, and that, of course, is Sporting KC. And I had a little debate in terms of these two positions too. I was originally going to put TFC in 2nd place and put Sporting KC where they were last week in the power rankings, but then I realized the fact that, I know both of them lost 2-0 at home, but TFC play against the Columbus Crew. Sporting KC play against NYCFC, which I'll get to in a minute, when you probably now know that they're going to finish the top spot, but they were playing against NYCFC. And if you look at the two performances, if you compare the two performances together, Sporting KC definitely played better in the loss. They definitely had the better chance to get a equalizer in that game, or get something out of that game. And Sporting KC was also kind of unlucky with refereeing decision. They had a penalty getting called back via VAR, which I really think that shouldn't have called back. That should have been a penalty. I mean, yes, the player got the ball. You see it on the replay, but he kind of went through the attacker's legs to get that ball. So I really think that is a stone cold penalty, and it's unfortunate that of course happened, and then they were very unlucky by hitting the post late in the game. But yeah, I'm just going to put Sporting KC in 2nd place because I feel like they were the better team in terms of these 2-0 losses between both of these teams, and also the fact that they play against NYCFC. And speaking of which, that is where they are this week. They're in the top of the mountain, and this shouldn't be a lot of surprise, and I don't really need to explain why they are top. They were like one of the few teams in the top 10s that actually won. I think they were the only team in the top 5 that actually won their game, and it was a very impressive win against Sporting KC, and also on the road too, nevertheless. And I really think NYCFC, this is a team that is going to really push for that supporter shield. There's always going to be doubt that what's going to happen when they make it to the playoffs and whether they can actually do something. But if there is a team that is going to be challenged with the supporter shield alongside with TFC, and when what we saw this week with Atlanta and how Atlanta just crashed and burned this week, NYCFC basically just shined through, and they're gonna really put the pressure on TFC this year in terms of the favorites of winning the supporter shield. But yeah, that of course is the power rankings done and dusted. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think about the power rankings here? Did I put a team way too high, or did I put a team way too low? And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I of course will be doing the match preview for match week 2 of the MLS season, probably on Wednesday, because I have to go to somewhere on Thursday evening. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I of course will see you guys next time.